I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't intelligent enough, that I wasn't clever enough. No one can say as a male that they can't see the lack of representation of women. They can't say that anymore because it's very visible on their table. Because we need men to be more empathic and allies to women. The leaders don't like to admit this or acknowledge this, but your social and emotional state as a leader.
I would love to know why you think, Anju, people should continue listening to our conversation.
Why would they not listen? If we want a world to feel equitable, safe, and we want to learn how to live together as men and women, or wherever we are on that spectrum, they should listen to us. My name is Anju Virdee. I'm the founder and director of Borden, and I coach women in senior leadership teams to be seen and to be visible.
So, what are the common obstacles women face in leadership roles that men just don't see or even experience?
I think we've just come out of International Women's Day, and there's a raft of data that's showing us that before we even walk into the workplace, we're already going to be seen different, inferior, not able to lead, and quite negative things about us. And some of the things that women are experiencing that men aren't experiencing, if we look at all of that data, is sexual violence, misogyny, racism, stereotypes. And like I said, before I've even walked in the door of an organisation, I'm already being judged. So it's pretty harsh out there.
And like when you've walked into certain organizations, do you feel like the heaviness on your shoulders already that you have to, quote unquote, perform above and beyond than your male counterparts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think when I was younger and I was working in executive and senior leadership roles, mostly in the public sector and also in education, I found myself being the only woman in the room or the only Asian woman in the room. So there's an intersectionality of my background that has me look at gender and race at the same time. So even though in education we've got a pretty good pipeline of women coming through, when we got to the executive roles, it was quite lonely. And I noticed slightly younger, I did exactly that. I overperformed. I questioned myself twice before I answered a question in the meeting. I'd normally say something in a board meeting and I'd get ignored. So then I'd feel like I need to say it 2 or 3 times. And I made it about me. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't intelligent enough, that I wasn't clever enough. I'd never been in a headship position, so of course I'm going to be undermined. And I accepted a lot of that bad behaviour. And I think there's women out there that we second guess ourselves, but we don't trust actually that we can do just as good a job, if not better, than our male counterparts. So we have a lot of internal mental noise that I find challenging still in myself then, and also with clients I work now where they're only woman in the room. So there becomes a pressure, a burden to, I don't know, like represent women, but also try not to be too challenging, and then you're over analyzing everything you do. So yeah, it just gets quite challenging emotionally. Absolutely.
There's like many men that actually support gender equality, but also as well, there's a kind of bias as well. It's a kind of bias that's not really recognized. Can you talk about certain ways biases appear in leadership roles, and how can men be more aware of this?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I would imagine most companies would be doing conscious and unconscious bias training and working with the HR teams. I think the first thing we have to do is act with curiosity. So if you are male in an organization, senior and executive, you've got to question yourself to say, why don't I have women around the table? So you've got to actively ask questions of yourself. If you're not aware of your biases, then we have to look at that education. So how do I become aware of what's happened? Because no one can say as a male that they can't see the lack of representation of women. They can't say that anymore because it's very visible on their table. One of the biases that's really strong in leadership is affinity bias, because we naturally look to see our own. So if I'm not careful as a male, I might create an all-male executive team or an all-male senior leadership team, which can unconsciously create a dominance. So then your worldview is then just filtered by that typical group of that is the same. And the risk is you don't see other points of view, other perspectives. Very recently in the media, and I'm not going to name a gentleman in America, but he does something with cars and space, has said that he doesn't know how to be empathic. That's really dangerous, because we need men to be more empathic and allies to women, so to support us. Now, some people might say neurobiological, neurodiversity, that we don't know how to be empathic. That's different, because we can support measures in terms of, noticing differences. But I think what men need to do in their education is start with that affinity, start with that awareness. I would ask people, who are the top 5 people that you always spend time with? 5 people in your life you always spend time with, and just look at who those people are. So we need to step out that affinity bias and look for differences, to talk to people, talk to your HR team, talk to your team, get a perspective.
How can men make a workplace more inclusive?
Gosh. I think that nowadays I would say that it has to be an executive and board conversation. Inclusive leadership starts from the top of the organisation. So you have to ask those questions. Why is my organisation not equitable? Why do I not have representation? And act with curiosity and understand. Talk to people in the organisation who are represented. So if you're from an underrepresented group, talk to them. Ask people for their lived experience. And don't, you can send a survey out, that's fine, but talk to people. Say, I want to understand why my organisation is not representative. What am I not doing correctly? And there's a huge amount of bias in recruitment. So speak to your chief people officer, and your HR, because they'll be able to tell you what's going on. And talk to people who do the interviewing, the recruitment, because there is definitely a perception around your organisation saying these doors are shut, you do not belong here, you don't walk in, and that comes through. So what's your attraction? Think about your employee life cycle. How do you attract? How do you onboard? How do you induct? How do you interview? How do you retain? Because what we do know is that the workplace, the 9-to-5 workplace, comes way back from the old 50s, where you just had someone in the house, one person going out to work, and then we worked 9-to-5 and you came home. But women have a double burden. And what that means is that we are still doing the household chores, we are still looking after and caretaking a family and maybe older parents, and we're going into the workplace. So is your organisation inflexible or flexible to understand what women's needs are to be in the workplace?
What changes need to be made culturally and structurally to actually ensure leadership opportunities for the next generation?
I think we have to start recognising that, first of all, you've got to know, wherever your organisation is, you've got to know your local labour market intelligence, and you need to know your demographic. So if your office is based in London, if you're based in Sheffield, who is your target audience to come and work with you? So systemically and systematically, you need to start looking at who you're going to be recruiting. We have 5 generations in the workplace: baby boomers, millennials, Gen A's, Gen Z's, Gen Z's. So we've got a very different and diverse group of people. So systemically and structurally, you need to recognize that you're going to have to target people and recruit people differently. So that's the kind of structures, so system structures, processes, and talk to other organizations, talk to executive agencies that do specialized recruitment. Go out of your organization. Culturally, we've got to do the work on ourselves. So leaders don't like to admit this or acknowledge this, but your social and emotional state as a leader is your culture. Your social and emotional state as a leader is your culture. So how you view the world will influence the culture of your organization. You know, there's overt and there's covert sexism, racism, misogyny. So if you are in engineering or you're in the science and technology, ed tech, you may think that that's not a place for women. And if you've got that unconscious bias, if you've got that thought going on, it will be represented in your culture. You know, so really, culturally and systemically, we have to do the work on ourselves, acknowledge where our barriers are, acknowledge where our biases are, and then change the way our system functions. And if we need to make changes, recruit differently. You know, we're in still in hybrid. That's okay. You don't have to force everyone back into the workplace. You just have to recognise that flexibility and agility is really important in your organisation and also in your mindset.
If it's possible, can we talk about, there's two TV programs that I want to talk about, and I'd love to get your opinion. The first program is Dragon's Den. I would love to kind of get your opinions about the dragons. So there's Sarah, there's Deborah, and sometimes they kind of have a guest dragon as well. But Sarah and Deborah in particular, what do they bring to the show, and literally how important is it to have strong female role models on a show like that?
I have a huge amount of respect for all of the dragons because they're really successful and they make a lot of money, more than me.
We need money. We need money.
Both those ladies that you've named are successful in their own right. They have an equal footing in that space, and they are knowledgeable, successful, intelligent, empowering, determined, focused, and ethical in the work they do. Just so happens they're women. So they've done a fantastic job of success, probably despite some of the things that I've talked about. I'm sure if they were here, they would talk about the relationship that they've had with men in the workplace and some of the barriers that they face. Yet, I think with grace, determination, and professionalism, they've done an amazing job. So I think the value they add is that they will understand all the things that I've just talked about. Flexibility, understanding that there are leadership traits, some feminine, some masculine, and that women can really make a really good go of being in business. So actually being an entrepreneur. And I think they would understand how to mentor and coach them with that flexibility and agility. So yeah, great role models.
And a second show is Apprentice. What do you think about the female candidates and also Baroness Karen Brady?
I think Baroness Karen Brady, again, an exceptional, talented woman in her own right. So the fact that she's a woman is even fantastic, but just in her own right, her knowledge, intelligence, and success is down to her grit, determination. And I think that she is there on equal footing with everyone else. I think trying to draw comparisons between male and female makes it less able to just see the true talent, the raw talent people have. So I would say sometimes women, arguably, there's a bias that if we show aggression, if we show passion, if we show competitiveness, then that's seen negatively on us. So I know there was one candidate who was seen to be a bit too aggressive. Well, if that was a man, I wonder if aggression would have been seen as negative. It's so important that we see ourselves in others. So representation is really important. So if I was in school, colleges, university, the younger generation of young people, I want young women to see that they can make it and that there's other women that have made it. I sometimes worry about social media and the perfectionism, and it works both ways. I've got to be overperforming and become imperfection and be perfective. And then I'm watching that as a young girl thinking, well, I've got to be like that and I'm not good enough. And that worries me because we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be, like you said, really core, integral and authentic in ourselves. And sometimes that doesn't happen because the world society we live in wants us to be a particular way. So I would always say to young people, find what is joyful in life, find what excites you, and start to find your real self. And you're only really going to do that by acting with curiosity, being creative and exploring. And I think it's a worrying time in the world, but it's also an exciting time to just work on ourselves. And self leadership starts at a really young age. And I think we can use social media in a positive way. I think we can start choosing to use the platform differently, because we blame social media, and that's a very blanket comment to make, but we can choose what we put on platforms. You know, we can choose to have pictures where we're not perfectly with makeup. You know, I'm not a Bollywood queen, but I am who I am, and I make sure that young people can see the success I've made can very easily be replicated by them. And they don't have to go through all the trauma I've been through. They can just bypass that and just become, really successful in their own right. Yeah.
What's the worst piece of advice someone has ever told you?
Worst piece of advice? I tend not to listen to people's advice. I've just recently been working with someone and they don't have a great amount of empathy. And it wasn't that the advice they were giving me was just keep doing something in the way they were doing, which wasn't ethical. And I just it didn't feel comfortable. And I've learned as I've got older that if it doesn't feel right, that's probably the right decision. So yeah, I think the advice of just keep going regardless of being wrong or unethical. Oof, not good. Not good.
And what's the best piece of advice someone has ever told you?
You've got 2 of these and 1 of these. Use this more. Use this less. See, still haven't learned. 2 of these, 1 of these. Use these more. Use this less. Yeah. Good advice. Still learning.
What's the one message that you want to tell the next generation out there?
Don't worry. Don't put worry into your mind. And if you notice any of negative thoughts coming, write them down on a piece of paper and throw the piece of paper away and throw the thought away. Don't listen to the noise out there around Gen Z and all that kind of stuff. Ignore it. You came through an education system, you've studied, you've got the job, you are rightfully there. That is your throne, that is your crown as a woman or as a guy. It is yours. Take your rightful place in the organisation, but keep learning. Keep that learner mindset. Act with curiosity. Seek out mentors. Seek out allies. Talk to people. Show people that you're ready to work. And if something's difficult, acknowledge it's difficult and ask for support. Don't stay on your own. So build a community around you. So talk to people that are new in post. Find out if there's any groups that the organisation has that you can join. Find an interest. And don't be afraid to be an individual and show your individuality. So yeah, I think, we're going to statistically, the Generation Z, we're going to be changing roles probably about 17 times statistically in our career. So every role is a learning opportunity. And if you do get feedback that was as crap as mine, then just say, thank you. I'll take that on board, and you move on. Never argue. Even if you don't agree with someone, just say, thank you. I'll take that feedback on board. Not sure I agree with it, but just move on. Because it's really important that everyone that works with you is going to give you some kind of learning. Even if it's a negative experience, there's something to learn there. So you can step back and say, what did I need to learn from this? How can I move on?